1971, I'm sitting here with Carolyn Perrin, who, with her family, has been experiencing supernatural occurrences. You picking up anything in here, hon?
Something awful happened here, Ed.
What is it?
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2013 horror film The Conjuring, a film that is directed, of course, by James Wan, and it stars Patrick Wilson, Vera Farmiga, Ron Livingston, and Lily Taylor. Now, the film tells the somewhat true story of the Perrin family in 1971 that move into a new property and then start experiencing some unexplained paranormal events. They then seek out the help of the Warrens, Lorraine and Ed Warren, who were paranormal investigators, demonologists, to essentially come in and help them, which they do. They arrive at the house, do their business, realise there's some paranormal events taking place, and try their best to help the family. Right, okay, so The Conjuring. Well, the Conjuring films. It's easy, I think, to sometimes judge the Conjuring universe as it's called overall. I think there's 7 films in total, 8 if you consider The Curse of La Llorona, which is in the Conjuring universe, even though it's not necessarily included. For example, I've got a Conjuring Universe box set, and it's only got 7 films, and it doesn't have Curse of La Llorona on there. So, the Conjuring Universe, there are some films in there with varying qualities, I suppose. But I think sometimes it's easy to forget the impact of The Conjuring when it was released in 2013. It was a highly polished, brilliantly made, massively effective horror film. Standing on its own 2 feet, forgetting about the rest of the films. And I remember watching this when it came out in 2013, and I was blown away by it. I thought it was really effective. Very frightening, brilliantly acted, felt really authentic, and it felt fresh. And it just felt like it ticked absolutely all the boxes. And it's just such an effective horror film. And it introduced the world in general to Ed and Lorraine Warren. And if you don't know, these are real life people. Everybody involved in this film existed, but in particular, Ed and Lorraine Warren. If you want to research these 2 guys, there's endless footage on YouTube of them. You can go on tours around their museum. There's loads of documentaries and such on YouTube about the Warrens. Many people saw them as frauds. Many people saw them as authentic demonologists, paranormal investigators. I think it just really depends on what you believe in, I suppose. Now, the film obviously take some liberties with this story, okay? I'm sure everything that we see on screen in The Conjuring did not happen in real life. I'm sure they ramped it up to 11, obviously to make the film far more cinematic and scary and enjoyable for an audience member. But everybody in this film existed. The story is real. The Warrens did investigate. There's some question, they investigated literally hundreds, arguably thousands of cases over their many, many decades as investigators. Their involvement in some are questioned, but they were certainly involved in this one in 1971. Even if you take out all of that, the fact that, it's based on so-called true events and all this kind of stuff, it's still a bloody effective horror film. Doesn't necessarily need to be based on true events, but I think sometimes with certainly a horror film, when it has that tag, based on true events, people are kind of like, oh, this really happened, and it sometimes draws people in a little bit more. I know it does, certainly with my wife, whenever we're watching any kind of film really, but in particular a horror film, she'll kind of say to me quite a lot, is this based on a real thing, a real event, and if it is, then she's sometimes a little bit more invested because she can, she knows these people are real and they existed, and some of the things portrayed in the film may or may not have happened. So it's a highly polished horror film, and many people would say it's too polished, it's too Hollywoodized. I think it's, and I know some people kind of say it's the perfect entry horror film. If someone wasn't necessarily into horror and you wanted to show them a horror film for the first time, The Conjuring would be a perfect place to start, because it's pitched perfectly. It's got some great, well-earned scares in there. It's got great effects. It's got a great story. It's got great performances. And it kind of finishes on a high sort of thing. It kind of has this crescendo all the way through. Just escalates and escalates and escalates until you get this massive conclusion at the end. It's a very, very well-made horror film. And I think James Wan, I think sometimes doesn't necessarily get enough credit. He's a really talented director, and he's created some very, very interesting things on screen. And it's very clear to me that he's got a real gift for horror, and I think this film proves it. Now, the Conjuring films, I'm intending on reviewing them all. I've already reviewed on the channel the third one that came out last year, The Devil Made Me Do It. So I'm not going to re-review that one, but I'll review The Conjuring 2, and then I'll go through all the Annabelles and things like that, and put them all up on the channel and give you my thoughts on them. I don't think any of them are shockingly bad or anything. I think some obviously are much better than others, but I think the first Conjuring, I think, is head and shoulders above everything else in the so-called Conjuring universe. It's a breath of fresh air at the time. I think, I could be wrong, but I certainly remember at the time, and I didn't have the channel when this came out, obviously, but I do remember at the time feeling that horror was fairly stale, and before The Conjuring came out, I couldn't honestly tell you of a really good horror film that kind of had me on the edge of my seat, that, stayed with me. And I think The Conjuring certainly did that. So it does. I think that this film and the Conjuring universe in general has its detractors, but I think it's a really superbly well-made horror film. If you haven't seen the Conjuring film, or indeed any of the Conjuring universe films, definitely start with this one and then make your way through them. They are, generally speaking, all certainly watchable, and some of them are really quite excellent, and this one especially. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed checking out this review. I will of course be back with loads more content and reviews on the channel very, very soon.